Hi everyone, it's Lindsay and welcome back to another video. Today I'm going to share with you 3 different ideas and ways to use the cover plate dies. I'm using the butterfly backdrop, which is brand new from Kat Scrappiness. Before I do that, I want to remind you to follow me across social media. Those links are going to be down in the description box below. Also, while you are down there, you can subscribe to my channel if you haven't already. And if you enjoy this video, the thumbs up button always helps and is appreciated. So here is a look at the butterfly backdrop cover plate die from Kat Scrappiness. This is A2 in size, so it fits over a complete A2 card base, and it has all these great little butterfly cutouts. It does cut the rectangle itself, and then it cuts all those little inlays too. There are a ton of different techniques you can use this for. You can just use it as is, lay it over a card base, a colored card base, or some patterned paper, and you'd be good to go. Add a sentiment, a little banner die. Gorgeous. But I want to share with you 3 different techniques or different ways to use this die. So the first, I'm starting off with a panel. This is heavyweight white cardstock, and it's slightly larger than A2 size. I've cut a piece of this. This is sukwang, I don't know how you say it. Anyway, it's a piece of adhesive, and it comes in sheets. I have ordered the scrapbook.com adhesive. I personally like it. It's a lot cheaper. I'll leave it linked down below instead of this. Plus, you can get it in 8.5 by 11 sheets, so it's a bit bigger than the 6 by 6 that I'm using here. I covered the entire piece of cardstock with that adhesive. This is going to create a very thick piece that I'm running through with this die in my big kick. It's not going to cut all the way through. I only want to run this through one time and leave it. You don't want it to cut all the way through. If it does, that's fine. You can still piece it back together, but I find it easier just to leave it attached as one piece. You just want it to cut through that top layer of adhesive. Now, I did need to go ahead and get out the rectangle itself, so I'm just using a craft knife to quickly tear that away, cut it through the remainder of what's left. It's not a lot, so you do want to be careful when you're dealing with this, but just go ahead and cut out that rectangle. You can also just use your paper trimmer. I just happen to have this on hand, so I grabbed it, and I'm going to cut it out very quickly. The corners on this die do have the slightest bit of rounding on them, just so they're not incredibly sharp. Be careful when you're going around those so you just don't chop them off or anything like that. Once I have it completely released, I'm going to go ahead and start taking off the front of the release paper from the butterflies on this die cut. I'm using my craft knife to do this. Just be careful. You can use anything to get this off your fingernails. Just, again, be careful. Those little pieces of paper can be really hurtful when they get caught under your fingernails if you do decide to go that way. So I'm releasing those. And while I'm doing that, I want to mention this is not my technique. This is not new. This is an old Jennifer McGuire technique. I wanted to try it for a long time. I've just never got around to it. And I wanted to try it with this die. I thought it would be gorgeous, and it was. So now I'm going to move on to the fun part, which is the glitter. I'm using this Wow glitter. You do want to use a fine glitter for this. Chunky would work. It's just not going to give as smooth of a result, and you're not going to get the precision that you can get with the fine glitter. I'm using 3 different colors here, and I'm starting off with this turquoise color. I want this to be in the center of the butterflies. I'm going to do 2-tone glitter. I'm using, again, my craft knife to go ahead and place this down very, very delicately right in the center of the butterflies. And I'm just putting down the tiniest bit. I am going to be mixing 2 glitters on these butterflies, so anything I use right now is going to mix in with the color I'm using next. So I'm not going to be able to reuse this and put this back in the container, and I don't want to be super wasteful. So I'm using, like I said, my little craft knife to just scoop up a little bit and place it down ever so delicately. You could use anything to put this down. You could use a popsicle stick. You could use the little craft scoops that are new out. You could use a little ice cream spoon like I've seen people use for their embossing powder. You could also just do these all in one color and make it really easy on yourself, but I wanted to try a little bit of 2-tone glittering here. Now once I had the blue on in all the centers of the butterflies, I'm going to go ahead and take this pink color and put it on the wings of the butterflies and fill in all that extra space. I'm using the shaker portion on these little dispensers that the glitter comes in. This is super helpful not to be so wasteful. If you're using a different kind of glitter, again, you could use a popsicle stick, a little spoon to get it out, because again, this is going to commingle with that blue, and unless you want a bunch of blue in your pink bottle or pink in your blue bottle of glitter, you're not going to want to put these back in. You could save the mixture and use it as just like a custom mix, but it's not a ton if you just use it very sparingly. I'm going to continue to cover those. I've just got a few left here. And even, you see this looks like a ton of glitter. When I hold up the bottle, barely any is even out of this. It's going to last a long time, so you're not losing a ton. I'm going to use that back of the release paper that I had in the beginning. I'll place that right over the top with the slick side down and use my bone folder to go ahead and press that glitter right into the open areas where the adhesive is. And it's going to look terrible until you wipe off the excess glitter, so don't worry about it when you pull up and look. Just make sure you're rubbing it down really well right into that adhesive. It's going to end up with more of a smooth look than a glittery look. Glitter is going to be stuck to the back of the release paper. You can wipe it off if you want to and keep reusing it. I'm going to toss mine and get rid of all that extra glitter, but you can see not a ton of glitter is wasted. I just use a dry brush. This is actually one of the Clarity stencil brushes. Any dry paint brush will work to remove that extra glitter. And there are my little butterflies. They are so cute. Now, you get to do the whole background. So I'm going to go ahead and take off the release paper from the background. If you have your glitter cleaned up, you shouldn't have any little pieces that get stuck in the background. So go ahead and take a few minutes to clean up your glitter before you move on to your next color. For this, I'm using a champagne color. I messed up a little bit here and I didn't use as contrasting of a color as I should have. Just think about your color choices before you put this on. But again, it looks beautiful. It is very pretty, but just make sure that you're using some contrasting colors so they're going to show up. I'm going to sprinkle glitter all over this background. Don't worry about getting it on the butterflies. It's not going to stick because there is no adhesive left showing. So you can cover those right up. And because we're only using one glitter color here, you can be as wasteful as you want here, because once I kind of brush this off onto that extra sheet of paper in the background, I can just pour this right back in the container. I use just my bone folder to press that right into the adhesive. Then I'll use that brush just to brush away any glitter that's kind of hanging on and not really stuck down. Also, make sure you get the sides so you get those nice clean edges too. But you can see as I brush away all that extra glitter, it takes on this really flat look, but it's got all that dimension from the glitter still. It is super gorgeous. Now, to clean up that extra glitter that's gotten kind of everywhere, I use a lint roller, a sticky lint roller that's kind of meant for pet hair, but it works great for cleaning up that glitter. It sticks onto it. It's not going to go anywhere. You can just peel off the sheet and pitch it when you're done. This also works great for embossing powders or any sequins that you spill, like seed beads, that kind of thing, that are really hard to pick up. It picks them up no problem. I added a few borders on the top and bottom of this with the border zigzag die set from Kat Scrappiness. Added a little sentiment in the bottom right hand corner, and that card was completely done. And because I didn't use very contrasting colors, like I said, for the background and the butterflies, I went ahead and just went with a monochromatic theme, grabbed some craft paper and did my borders out of that to kind of tie in with it. I attached the whole thing to an A2 top folding card base. Super simple and easy once that background is finished, and it's so much fun. I did add some jewels to this too from Kat Scrappiness, the brown ones. I added jewels to all these cards. They're a great little finishing touch. For my next card, I'm going to go ahead and take that same butterfly backdrop die, and I will cut it from some white heavyweight cardstock. This time I wanted to cut all the way through, so I'm going to run it through once and then back again just to make sure I get a nice clean cut. But it should cut through once. I just had adhesive on the first one, and you didn't want it to cut all the way through. So once that was done, I went ahead and cut another piece of heavyweight white cardstock. And this one I cut very slightly smaller than A2 size, just about 1/8 of an inch from the top and the side. Very, very slim cuttings there. I wanted to do that so I didn't have to line it up perfectly when I go to put this behind the actual panel. I'm going to ink blend on this panel that I cut slightly smaller. I'm using some of the makeup blending brushes and Versafine Clair inks. Now with this panel, it's going to be behind the butterfly backdrop to give some color to those butterflies. The great thing about doing this technique or any overlay die cut on top of ink blending, you do not have to be careful with your ink blending. It's going to look great no matter what. So even if you are horrible at ink blending like I am, I'm totally impatient with it is what the problem is. You can still do this and it's going to look great. I'm not taking my time here at all. I'm just putting on color onto this background to get it nice and bright and vibrant. And I know what you're thinking. You're probably looking at these and think those inks do not blend well at all. You shouldn't be using those. I promise they blend beautifully if you take your time with it, but I just didn't today because I knew the majority of this was going to be covered up anyway. The turquoise color I started off with is called Warm Breeze. Then I moved on to purple, which is called Fantasia. And finally, I'm finishing up with this very bright and vibrant pink color, which is called Glamorous. You can customize this background, play around with your ink combinations, your placement of the ink, all that great stuff. Now I needed to go ahead and take all those little die cuts that I got from the butterfly backdrop die, and I'm going to score them right down the middle. This is going to allow me to fold them up and create some dimension with them. I give them a nice crease with my bone folder, and I just continue to do that for each and every little butterfly. Now, a good tip whenever you're doing something like this and you're going to be saving the inlay pieces, throw them in a little container off to the side so you don't lose any of them, and that way they're not flying across your desk as you're finishing the rest of your project. There are a few little butterflies in here which are just kind of side butterflies. They're kind of on their side. What I did with those was I scored them about 1/8 of an inch in from the side of the butterfly. That's going to allow their wings to stick up. It's a very thin score line. You're going to have to cut some pieces of adhesive down in a moment, but I promise it's all worth it. I used some double-sided adhesive on the back of my butterfly backdrop panel, and I'm going to place that right over the top of my ink blended background. Now this is why I cut the ink blended background slightly smaller. I didn't have to worry about lining it up perfectly. It's going to cover up the majority of the background, but it's going to cover up all the places you need it to show through, but you don't have to worry about perfect placement. Now this background would be gorgeous just as is without adding anything to it, but what I wanted to do was put back in those white butterflies that I had die cut out, but add that extra dimension. So you're getting still the dimension, you still have those little peaks of color behind the wings, but it just adds that little bit of extra wow to your card. You could use just regular double-sided adhesive to place these back in and still with that dimension, but I'm going to add even more dimension by using foam tape right in the center of each one of these little butterflies. So I just cut tiny little pieces, attach that to the score line that I made, and then pop them right back into place. Once you get them into their little openings, it's going to fit like a puzzle piece. You can just squeeze the little wings together and give them their extra dimension that they might have lost while you kind of push them into place. Now, a few more options with this. You could just add one butterfly, like you could have left it with just the largest butterfly back into place. You could just do a few of them, popping them back into place. You could switch up the colors on the front and maybe do foiled butterflies where you put them back into place. It really is up to you. You can totally customize this technique. I kept mine pretty monochromatic here, very simple. I really wanted those pops of color underneath the wings to really pop through and be the main focal point. So again, totally customizable. Think about all the different ways that you could make this specific technique work with your card making style. Again, there are going to be a few of those little bitty side butterflies. What I did with those was I just cut the tiniest bits of adhesive and placed them right on the very edge of where the body would be. And then I just popped the butterflies into place and used my fingers to kind of fold up the wings so they still had some dimension as well. On some of these pieces, you are working with very small bits of foam tape, and you might think that it's not going to hold it in place, but as long as you use good adhesive, it's going to hold everything right where it should be. You do just want to be a little careful when you're sliding this card into your envelope so you don't snag any of those butterflies and kind of rip them off. I have my last little butterfly that I'm going to put in place. This is the smallest one, so I saved him for last. I put down my foam tape and again just pop that butterfly right into place. And there is my card ready to go. I added a sentiment in the bottom right hand corner. Attach the whole thing to an A2 top folding card base. And if ever your butterflies look a little flat, just give them a little pinch in the center and they'll come right back up with that added dimension. I love this technique and I love all the different ways you could customize it and really make it fit what you want it to look like. Now I did go in and add a few of the white sequins from Kat Scrappiness, or the white jewels, excuse me. I think they add just the great finishing touch on this card. Now for my final card, this one is a lot of fun and it's very flat, no dimension, I promise. But it does have a fun shaped card base to it. So I'm using the rectangle zigzag dies. These are new from Kat Scrappiness and I'm using the largest that's in the set. I'm going to cut it twice from some heavyweight white cardstock that you would use for your card bases because this is going to be my card base, what I attach everything to. Once I have my two die cuts, I'm going to go ahead and take one of those and put a score line in it. I just lined it up in my paper trimmer, added 1/2 inch, and just popped a little score line in there with my bone folder. You can use a score pal, score buddy, whatever you have, whatever you use to normally score your card bases with that you make yourself. I put a little bit of a crease in there too with my bone folder just so it would open and close very nicely and you wouldn't have to kind of fight the card base. Once I had that in there, I'll add a little bit of adhesive right on top of that score line. You don't want any to hang out here because again, this is going to be your card base. Then I can line up that top die cut that I didn't put any score lines in. I just like to pick it up, kind of hold them in my hands and line them up. Line it up on the bottom, and then when I know everything's nice and aligned, I'll go ahead and press it right on the top, and there's my card base ready to go. It opens and closes super easily, and it'll still stand up because I use that heavyweight cardstock. I will be ink blending straight onto the front of the card base itself. I lined up some painter's tape with the stitch marks. Then I taped the whole thing down to just an extra sheet of paper, so I kept those nice white edges. I'm using some Catherine Pooler ink pads, and I'll be using my makeup brushes to go ahead and blend this out. There you can see me cleaning off my makeup brush because I didn't clean it off as well as I should have when I used that Versafine Clair ink to do my ink blending. I'm using 3 different colors and I'm going very pastel with these colors, but I do want a nice intensity of color on here. So I'll build up the color and continue to just blend back and forth between the 2 colors until I get the nice blend that I want and also the intensity of color that I want. The great thing about using painter's tape to mask your area, if you feel like you don't have enough of a border or a white edge and you feel like the painter's tape is just too thick, you can lay that into your paper trimmer and just chop it in half. Chop however thin of a line you need. You don't have to keep a ton of widths of painter's tape or masking tape on hand. You can cut those down in your paper trimmer and make it the size you want it to. That's just a little tip because I do not have the storage space to store all those different widths, but sometimes it's just too thick and I really want a nice thin border. Now I'm going to finish up with this last little pink bit right on the top and just blend out the rest of the background. And once it was where I wanted it, it was time to remove all of that tape that I have on there. Whenever you're removing your tape, you do want to be a little careful. It is best to kind of stick it against your shirt before you even put it down and release some of that tack. But whenever you're tearing it off, just make sure you kind of pull it back on itself, and it shouldn't tear your paper, and just go slowly and go in the opposite order you put it down. So start pulling up the last piece you put down, so you don't have to do any kind of wiggling like I did here. Once I had that all removed, it was time to stencil in the rest of my background. Now I did want to keep those nice white edges that were on the opposite side of the stitching, so I did mask those off with some more tape, plus that's just going to hold everything in place while I work. I will be using the front of that backing paper that I used on my very first card from the glitter. I saved that. That makes a great stencil because it has a slick surface. You don't want to like put any water or anything over it because it will absorb it and just become a mess. But if you're just using ink, it makes a really great stencil and you don't have to do any more cutting. You already had it on hand. I overlaid that on top of my little panel there, right where I wanted it, and then taped it down so it's not going to shift around on me. Then I'm using a nice black ink. You do want to use a very, very black ink while you are doing this, and I'm going to press it through my little homemade stencil there with a finger dauber. If you don't have any finger daubers, makeup sponges work great. You could also ink blend the color on. I really like the Versafine Clair Nocturne ink to do this because it is a nice rich black ink. It's also a pigment ink, so it's going to sit on top of the surface. It's not going to commingle with any of those inks underneath it. It's going to sit on top of them and cover them up. If you don't have a black pigment ink, you could always do a Versamark ink through the stencil and then heat emboss a black embossing powder, or a black sparkle embossing powder would be really pretty. You could also put some black modeling paste or anything like a very thick black acrylic paint would work as well. I've done this technique with that. Any sort of very dark, richly pigmented black that's going to cover up all that different ink underneath it and create that really nice silhouette look, and you won't have anything peeking up from behind it. I went ahead and just placed the rest of that ink through. Then I went ahead and removed the top stencil, my homemade stencil, and the rest of that painter's tape that I had put down. Now a little bit of ink did sneak through where I guess I had a little bit of an opening. What I do is just take my sanding eraser. You can also use a sanding block or a nail file, and just very lightly scratch away at it with that sanding eraser or whatever you're using until the ink comes up. Just do very gentle layers. Do more gentle layers than very harsh sanding at first. That way you're not taking away any of that stitching. But if you just keep going with very thin layers, you can remove all of that ink and you will preserve the stitching on the side there. There is a finished look at that background. I absolutely love this one. It's nice and flat. I just added a little sentiment with the same black ink in the bottom right hand corner, a few of the little silver jewels from Kat Scrappiness, and this card was done. Super simple with this one. But I think the thing that takes this one over the top is that nice shape card that you get with the zigzag rectangle dies. A final look at all three cards. I know this was a super long video. I hope you all enjoyed it, but that is going to do it for me today. There are links on the left side of your screen that you can click on. You can also subscribe to my channel over there. Don't forget all the information that's going to be in the description box below. Thanks for watching and happy crafting.